currently having a little bit of a relaxing session here by the Vistula River in Warsaw, Poland. But I guess you don't want to watch that. Should we go to the old town? Maybe I can show you a little bit of the history of this really important European city. Or would you rather just watch me laid here? Yeah, let's go to old town. It's a little cold anyway. I could do with getting some exercise and heating up. Let's go. This is a statue of a mermaid bearing a sword and a shield. What relevance does that have? We're in Warsaw, nowhere near a sea where mermaids were, supposed to live in the legend. We're only by the Vistula River, Poland's largest river. Well, there's a legend that this mermaid migrated here and began eating all the fish. And the local fishermen wanted to solve the mystery of where all the fish were going. Anyway, one such fisherman found the mermaid and wanted to beat her with his oar to give her some punishment, but she began to sing. He fell in love with her voice and he struck a deal with her. He came to the people of Warsaw in the old town and he told them, look, she's going to keep eating the fish, but in turn she will then sing for us in the square. Well, that was a good deal that worked for everyone involved. She got fed, they got entertained. But then there was a malicious man who wanted to make more money from her, so he kidnapped her, stole her away and kept her in a chest. Anyway, in his house you could hear her scream and cry for help. A young boy heard these screams, broke in, freed her and took her back to the river. She came back later, bearing a sword and shield, declaring that she will defend the people of Warsaw. I'm here in Warsaw Old Town. You can see, gearing up for Christmas. Everybody's in jovial spirits. Crowds of tourists, and it's also Polish Independence Day tomorrow, which is a bank holiday here. Nobody will be working, everybody will be out celebrating. But not so long ago, during the Second World War, you see it looked very different. In fact, there was not much left. You see the start of the Second World War. Nazi Germany was very successful in its invasion of Poland, and it occupied Warsaw. During this time, the presidential palace that we're about to see was turned into a mere gambling den for the high-ranking officers during their downtime to drink, play casino games. It was a failed uprising by the Polish to try and seize back their city. Because it was unsuccessful, Heinrich Himmler still had control, and out of spite, to get revenge, he ordered the complete destruction of the city. 84% of its buildings were destroyed in a 100-day campaign in which infantry went from building to building with explosives and flamethrowers. So much of this was reconstructed after the Second World War. It isn't much older than 50, 60 years. Full of important buildings survived, one of which was the presidential palace. With good reason. Let's go and take a look and I'll tell you. So behind us is the presidential palace. This is where Duda, the current president, lives and works. And it still stands, just as it was, with obviously some minor renovations, as it did during the Second World War. Why was this? Was it because the gambling den that they turned it into was so precious to them? No, because they also let the Bristol Hotel, just down the road, which I'll show you shortly, survive. The reason being, it was good protection and shelter from artillery fired from the east by the Soviets, who were trying to capture the city as well. So that's the only reason they survived. Simply so that they could survive the shelling attacks. Here we stood outside probably one of the most iconic hotels, not just in Poland but in Europe, Hotel Bristol. And just across the road, Hotel Europski, both built in Neo-Renaissance style in the late 1800s and the early 1900s by father and son architect duo Marconis, Enrico and Vladislav Marconi. the surname doesn't sound particularly Polish. That's because they had Italian ancestry. Hotels built by father and son. This one was rebuilt as it was destroyed. Bristol Hotel remained, as I said earlier, to provide shelter for the Nazis during Soviet shelling. So if anybody ever asks you while you're in Warsaw, hey, who built that hotel? Who built that hotel? You need to remember the first names. Just say Marconi and you're half right. And you'll sound like you know something. Anyway, here's a funny anecdote relating to the Rolling Stones. The year is 1967. Poland is behind the Iron Curtain because, yes, after the Second World War, it became sort of a client state of Soviet Russia and it belonged to the USSR. It was uncommon for Western musicians to come and perform here, but in 1967 the Rolling Stones came.
Ci, którzy je zdobyli, niewiele mogli usłyszeć. Zresztą tego się nie słucha, to się przeżywa. Tak przynajmniej nakazuje obowiązujący tu wszystkich rytuał.
They stayed in the Hotel Europski and they were set to perform probably the biggest show that Communist Poland had ever seen from a Western band. And at the time, the Rolling Stones were as big as it gets. Anyway, they didn't really read the contract. They wanted to be paid in US dollars. It was a choice between Polish zloty and Russian rubles, both of which weren't worth very much at the time. So initially they refused. They decided, you know what, forget the concert. We don't want to perform anymore. The Minister of Culture, he sort of liked them and he wanted them to perform. So he made a deal. Let's pay with one of Poland's best exports at the time. The biggest was black coal. I don't think they wanted to take a load of black coal home with them. So what was the next best option? Premium Polish vodka. Now we're not talking a couple of cases or bottles of Polish vodka. We're talking a freight train carriage worth of Polish vodka to take home back to the UK. The Rolling Stones agreed. Obviously, rock stars with a near unlimited supply of the best vodka you can imagine. Yeah, they shook hands on it. They performed. The Minister of Culture kept his word and shipped the vodka home via freight train. It arrived in the UK. What the Rolling Stones didn't consider: import tax. The Rolling Stones refused to pay it. So eventually, the UK returned to sender. Communist Poland. Speaking of great musicians, here's one for you. Frédéric Chopin, born here in Warsaw when he was under Russian rule. See, in the 1800s, Poland didn't actually exist as Poland. He was divided between Prussia, Austria and Russia. He was born under Russian control. He's a classical musician, renowned today for his work. He left when he was 19 in the early 1800s to live in Paris to embark on his musical career. As he got older, he wanted to return home to where his heart was. But because he left illegally, he was unable to return. He had no documents. You see, he asked for permission to leave the country at the time, and they denied his leave. But he went anyway. When he wanted to return, he visited the Russian embassy and asked, please, look, I just really want to go home. They said, well, we have the documents for Frédéric Chopin. Frédéric Chopin never left the country, so how can he return? He wanted his heart to be returned here. Also, at the time, because medicine wasn't so advanced, oftentimes when people went into comas, they would wake up when they were buried, presumed dead. A lot of coffins that have been excavated from older times have had scratch marks from someone trying to claw desperately their way out of the coffin when they've awoken from a coma. The only way to be sure this wouldn't happen was to remove the heart. Obviously there's no risk of them waking up. Chopin's heart was removed and his sister put it in a jar, preserved with vodka, travelled back to Warsaw, hid it up her dress, which at the time would not be searched, and returned it here to Warsaw. Right now, it's hidden in a column in this church, the church of the Holy Cross. Why is it within a column? Well, it would look a little bit macabre and gory, just left in a jar while people were praying. And it's to preserve it. You see, during the German occupation, his heart was stolen by a German soldier. It was later returned after the Second World War, but there was a lot of doubt as to whether that was the original. Was that Chopin's hut, or was it just a random hut? Who could tell at the time, right? Well, in 2008, it was tested. His body and his heart. The DNA was a 1-to-1 match. This confirmed that it was, in fact, Chopin's heart.
In the darkest hour lies Chopin's heart. In the darkest hour lies Chopin's heart.
So we actually entered the church during service, at which point you can't really explore the church. You can just go and sit and take part in the service, sing some hymns and whatnot. I'm not sure I know any Polish hymns, so I'm going to sit that one out. Just wait for the service to finish, then we're going to go inside and take a look at the column where Chopin's heart is stored. And I just want to take this time to make a correction. The jar that his sister carried through the Austrian border to here into Warsaw did not contain vodka as a preservative for the heart. It was cognac. And there's Warsaw University. The eagle on top of it, that's the symbol of Poland, the crest of Poland. And there's 5 stores around the eagle. Those represented the 5 departments, the 5 things that were taught originally when the university was first opened. Of course, now there are countless others. It was the best university in Poland, eventually overtaken by Krakow University. And then I think it reclaimed its spot. It's still one of the most prestigious in Europe today. Behind us is a bar, and I think it's time to stop for a beer. Let's get a little bit warm, maybe a shot of vodka, while we wait for service to end and the Holy Cross. Of course, while I'm here, hiding from the brutal, cold, winter air, it would be rude of me not to warm the insides as much as the outsides with a nice shot of the local vodka. I was going to go for mead as well, but I fancied a simple Schwieg beer. Polish vodka is the best. Don't let anybody tell you any different. Don't let anybody tell you any fancy artisanal vodka from somewhere else in Europe, or even Russian vodka is better. Polish vodka wins hands down every time. Cheers. Another traditional Polish delicacy. Here we have goose fat, or lord. It's served like this, almost reminiscent to a stuffing in its texture and even its flavour. It kind of reminds me of like apple sauce and stuffing that you would put on like a roast pork sandwich. You simply spread it along this warm bread as if it was butter or pate. Get a nice healthy amount on there, and then to cut through the rich fatty flavours, you add a little gherkin. Make it a little bit of a sandwich, an open-faced sandwich, and then just take a bite. You get crusty, warm, fresh bread, that fatty, rich, flavourful goose fat, and then the sweet acidity, the crunch of the gherkin, and all those elements just come together to form a delectable pub snack. I love this stuff, honestly, and it's always really cheap as well, which is a bonus. So the spot behind me, Joprovnia, is where we ate. It's just across the street from the university, here on sort of the main street of the old town. Definitely recommend it. It's a family business, and for the area you kind of expect tourist traps, right? The prices were great, the food, I mean, we only had the Lord, but it was really good. The soups looked amazing that were being delivered to the tables, and the prices for the beers were good. The service was great as well. So if you find yourself here, definitely head into Joprovnia, but it is very popular, so you might struggle for a seat. Mass should be finished, so let's go and check out. Chopin's Heart.
Lascio pensare in the darkest hour. Lascio pensare, and though the walls are silent, keep us apart.
Over here at the monument of the unknown soldier, where there's going to be some kind of rally, some kind of an event for tomorrow, which is Independence Day here in Poland. Poland's very first electric escalator. This was originally built in communist Poland, and at the time it became the country's #1 tourist attraction for domestic tourists. Apparently this would be so crowded, full of children coming to ride it, because of course it was free, and at the time there'd never been anything like it before. So this was quite exhilarating for kids at the time. Yeah, I guess we could call it Communist Poland's roller coaster. Free of charge. Better than Disneyland, eh? No doubt this has undergone extensive renovations since it was first built all the way back in, I believe, the 1950s. But back then, children would be crowded to take their turn. This would be no doubt full. The bear behind us, you might be wondering, what relevance does this have to Poland and to Polish culture? Maybe it's a character from Polish folklore or a Polish cartoon. You'd be wrong. It's actually a character cartoon called Masha. You see the guy in the costume, much like King Kong over here, is very likely a Ukrainian refugee, busking for some cash, you know, attracting tourists with families and children to come and give him a bit of money in exchange for a photograph. King Kong, fine. The other teddy bear, fine. But I would argue that perhaps Poland having a Russian cartoon character or mascot is a little bit culturally and politically insensitive, would you not say? A little bit tone deaf, in my opinion. Although if you have a dog sense of humour, like me, you'll find it a little bit amusing, like me. Well, yeah, at the same time, probably should choose another costume, maybe like fucking Batman or something. I don't know. That's just my opinion. Here we are at one of the most famous landmarks here in Warsaw, Sigismund's column. This column had to be rebuilt, much like everything you see, all the buildings behind me, because during the Second World War, a German Tiger tank fired at the column and knocked the whole thing down. But even prior to that, it suffered a little bit of war damage, and if you come closer, you can see the marks. These marks have been pasted over. Old bullet holes. Yeah. These are bullet holes from fighting during the war. But yeah, this was all toppled over and had to be rebuilt. Is the Royal Castle. Now, what's the difference between a castle and a palace? Castle, usually a fortification, used for defence. Palace, just the home of the royals. This is just a palace. It was never a fortification, but it was called castle, nonetheless. This was also rebuilt. You see this queue? The reason it's so busy is because there's usually an entrance fee. to get into the castle. But because it's Independence Day tomorrow, it's totally free of charge. Hence why so many people are waiting to get in. Let's go check it out. So, here we are, the Royal Castle. Look behind you. All of this is the majority of like Old Town. Now, it's not very old. This was all rebuilt after the World War. It was all demolished. Everything, all of it, the column, the buildings. So was this. So was the Royal Castle. In communist Poland, they did great things for rebuilding the city. They wanted to rebuild everything in the image of what it looked like before the Second World War. They did so quite well. I mean, this all looks exactly as it would have before the Second World War, but they left this in ruins. Why? Well, it's a castle. It represents imperialism. It represents a class system. These two things are very antithetical to a true communist society, so they decided this place can fuck off. This place can be left in ruins while everything else is rebuilt in its former glory. This all changed in the 1970s. In the 1970s, the Polish communist government were desperately trying to win back favour of its people. So they came out and they said, you know what, we understand. This place has significant history. This is integral to this country's traditions, to its heritage, so we will rebuild it. But there was a caveat. The caveat was that you're going to have to dig into your own pockets and find the money that it's going to cost to renovate. And eventually, it was built. I'm waiting in the queue. I'm going for it. Let's see if I can be patient enough. And just as we were making progress, we saw the entrance. A guy, along with like 20 others, turned around from the front of the queue, started walking back and let us all know that they turned them away, they were closing. Still quite early, I thought he closed at 5 and it's like 20 to 4. Anyway, what can you do? In 1947, the Polish government invited an international conference of journalists from around the world to come and get an idea, to show the world just the scale and scope of damage done to the city by the Nazi Germans. The street that you see here was all ruins. Some sections of building remained, but there were no homes left. And yet, people who fled Warsaw during the war came back with their families to settle. Some, of course, migrated to other cities in Poland, but many came back. But where do you live when your city's ruins? That's where we lived, the ruins. So imagine like half a section of the house remained, they'd settle in there, keep warm with a coal fire. But it also meant that these buildings had no structural integrity anymore. All it took was extreme weather conditions to cause further damage. People were still dying after the Second World War because they were living in the ruins, and some strong winds would knock the walls down and they'd come collapsing on them. Which is fucking awful to imagine, right? But it's only because of them retaining their faith in their city, coming back with the desire to rebuild. It's only because of them that this city stands as it is today. So their sacrifice and also their hope and their patriotism was kind of what makes Warsaw still the capital today and rebuilt in its pretty much former glory.
Bazowe użyć z katedry historii, środkowe kółko i trójkąty do przodu podjechane.
This is sarcophagus of a baby. There's a dead baby in there. This is what a coffin would look like back in the 16th century for a baby.
in the Second World War, I think in 1944. This was destroyed. They opened up a side wall with one of those tiny little Goliath tanks, fired an explosive into it, and then destroyed it from the inside. So this is one of the 84% of buildings in Warsaw that was destroyed by the Nazis. Why was I just doing a silly little skip around this bell? Well, the bell is an overlooked little tourist site here in Warsaw. It's steeped in legend. There's a tragic love story behind the origin of it. It's a fake story, of course, it's fictional. But tour guides have created like a little story around you being able to get your wishes granted if you do the little skip dance around it. Here, inside this statue, is a view. On the other side, the city. Just take a look. What's the name of the other side of the city? They call it Praha. Sounds familiar, right? Kind of like the capital of the Czech Republic. Here's another legend. Catholic refugees from the Czech Republic, from Prague, came here, settled, and named it after their old town. That's bullshit. It's actually called that after the Polish word for the burned place. See, 1,000 years ago in the Middle Ages, that was nothing but forest. They needed somewhere for agriculture to feed the people living on this side of Warsaw. So they burned down the forest to make way for fields where they could grow crops. That's why it's called Praha. Don't believe the legend. The recurring theme of the channel. It's nonsense. These stupid locks, they should be all removed. I hate it when people put locks on things. Why can't they just come and take a picture, you know? All this stuff. You just make things look bad. Fucking stupid. Don't put love locks on bridges. So we're here at Smolna 14, Chopin, which is a restaurant named after the famous musician. It also houses a small concert venue where we can watch someone recite his classical music. And that's what we're going to do right now to start our final evening here in Warsaw. We're going to see someone perform Chopin. So let's go. So, because tomorrow is Independence Day here in Poland, they have a special menu at this Polish restaurant that we've come to. Here we have goose gizzards, served with buckwheat and beetroot. Take a look at that. I have never in my life eaten goose gizzards. I've eaten goose many times, love it. Specialty here in Central Europe. Never gizzards. So let's just get stuck in there and try some of that with a bit of buckwheat. It looks good. Wow. Very different texture from what I was expecting. Super soft. It's been cooked like a stew in like a gravy. Really tasty. Wow. Let's get a bite with every element, a bit of the beetroot as well. Yeah, it's good. Anyway, I'm gonna finish this, head back, hit the sack, ready for tomorrow's celebrations. Good night.